Hi everyone, so here we are, past the halfway mark for everything required for Project 4. Yay! So, let's look at what you should have done by this stage. I'd expect that by now that you've most likely booked your time and date and location for your training, you've found your unit of competence that you'd like to train, and you've decided what parts of it that you'd like to train, as well as contextualised where you've needed to. You've sourced your students, and you've spoken to the appropriate stakeholders regarding the training that's to take place. So let's very quickly recap on last week and what should have been done then. First of all, you should have completed your LLN exercise by creating a spiky graph and letting me know what tools you use to determine the ACS levels. You should have built your objectives and placed them in your session plan. You've clustered and built your assessment, and you've created benchmarked answers in readiness for your delivery. And finally of last week, you created an assessment matrix for your entire unit of competence. With all this complete, it's time to finalise your session plan. Now, you want to make this session plan as detailed as possible. When you're writing it, think of what would happen if you were sick one day and someone else had to come in and cover your training session. They would need to be able to refer to this document in such a way as to be able to run your class exactly the way you would like to have it run. The more detailed it is, the better it is for everybody. Think back to your course when you determined what made a good session. It always comes back to preparation, doesn't it? There's no such thing as being too prepared for your session. Do you remember COPE? That's exactly what we've been looking at leading up to this session. Know your clients. Have very clear objectives, realising that your learners have objectives as well, and now we're specifically looking at preparation. Something else to keep in mind, if you're going to be able to cover the entire unit of competence in your session plan, or if you're not able to, I should say, you will need to create a second session plan to show how you would cover the remainder of the unit. We talked about this in the very first of these series of videos. So what should be in your session plan? Check your manual for this, as there's an entire chapter set aside for good session planning. Also, look at the template you've been provided with and look at the headings. There should be enough information just in that to base your sessions around. So now you've got your head around your session plan, you can start to put together your group learning and assessment plan. Remember, your group learning and assessment plan is essentially your contract with your client. This is where they're going to be considering what's in it for me. So you want to be able to show them exactly what they're going to get for their money. This document will go into considerable detail, information about when you'll be running the session, what you'll be covering, who's going to be involved with the session, your objectives, pretty much everything that they would need to know in regard to the training that's going to take place on their behalf. Now, some of this may seem a little repetitive to what you've already put into your session plan, but your client doesn't get to see that. So this doesn't really matter. This might be their first look at what most of this information is, and recognising that the group learning plan in fact is a way of saying, this is the information that you're going to be receiving, and this is the type of training that I want to give you, and you should be using me for this. In a sense, you're writing it almost as if it's a sales document. Now, your session plan and group learning and assessment plan is done. Start organising your resources. Last week we went over learning styles once again. We talked about resources that were going to benefit visual, auditory and kinesthetic learners, and how we're going to be making sure that everything you organise that will take place within your session gets the most out of it for your learner. Think about good sessions that you've sat in on as a student in the past. What worked, what didn't work? And finally, remember to build your training with the objectives in mind and with the knowledge that you must engage your audience. A good hook, perhaps, maybe a warm-up, some sort of activity that's going to be a good mixture of learning strategies that's going to ensure that successful learning experiences will take place for your students. We're nearly there, so knock this week's exercises over as quickly as possible and let's get ready to train. I hope this helps. Next week we'll be back with week 5, and we're really at the pointy end of our session, where next week you're going to actually be delivering. Thank you. We'll see you then.